Hello, everyone. This is Brian Lewis with JTNS, and I'm happy to come here today and talk to you about accident causes and controls. I hope everyone's having a good day. As we do at JTNS, if anybody has any kind of near misses or accidents they want to speak about, we want to give people an opportunity to talk about that stuff. Basically, because we learn real well from each other. And we need to learn from near misses and accidents. It's part of having safety first type of culture. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video at this point and talk about it, that's a good thing to do. After that, restart the video and we'll get on with our PowerPoint presentation and our monthly safety meeting. All right, now that we're back, let's go ahead and talk about our PowerPoint. And so in our topic today is accident causes and controls. So keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead and talk about this type of stuff. What causes accidents, how we control accidents. A lot of accidents comes down to attitude. It just absolutely comes down to attitude. So we're going to talk a lot about attitude today. We're also going to talk about some of the things that we need to pay attention to make sure that we don't have any kind of problems with safety and health, near misses, accidents, things like that. So a lot of safety and health simply comes down to what are our priorities and our decisions, because our decisions are based on our priorities. Okay, so if your priority is getting off early and safety is not high on the list, you're going to take shortcuts. It's just that simple. If, on the other hand, safety and quality control is a priority, you're going to try and do things the right way. You're going to try and follow procedures, whether they're written down in a document somewhere or they're verbal. And so I'm challenging you right off the bat. What are your priorities and how do they influence your decisions? So keep that in mind. Priorities, decisions, they're important. It's important that we identify this and make sure we keep safety a priority. And safety culture, we talk about that a lot. Most of you all have heard me talk about safety culture before, and it sounds like it's a big deal, but really, what is safety culture? It is safety a priority. Do we value our lives? Do we value the lives of our coworkers? Do we value our coworkers' families and our families? Because if you do value yourself and you value your coworker and all of your all's families, safety is going to be a priority. It just absolutely is going to be a priority. So keep that in mind. We do value our families. Do we value our coworkers' families? Like I said, these are people we don't always have in the front of our mind. When we do have them in the front of our mind, they're not always in good light sometimes. So keep that in mind. We want to value the people we've made commitments to, the people we love and that love us. So I don't think anyone's going to stand up and say that they don't value yourself or themselves. They don't value their coworkers or their families to the point where someone ends up really hurt bad or dead. We don't tend to think about those things. We put them in the back of our mind, and we move on with what we need to move on with, right? So keep this in mind. Safety needs to be in the front of our mind. If we do things right, if we make sure that we're following the proper procedures, then things are going to go smooth and the work's going to get done quicker, and no one's going to have to come behind us and fix what we should have done on the front end. So keep that in mind. What do our actions say about us? If we are moving along and not really doing what we need to do and taking shortcuts, we're telling people safety is not a priority. We're telling people safety is not a priority. We don't want to do that. We want safety to be a priority. So make sure your actions, your decisions that you make Tell people what your priorities are. Make sure they tell people what your priorities are. Behind our actions are a lot of big and little decisions that we make every day, and that shows what our priorities are. Well, just like I said, the little decisions you make can have awfully large consequences, unfortunately, if we're not paying attention. And big decisions can have consequences also. And we want to make sure that when we make those decisions, that our priority is what it needs to be. Do we put guards back on equipment after we maintenance? After we do maintenance, and quite simply, that's valuing other people. That's valuing other people, and we're valuing them less at our convenience. Most of the time, we don't put a guard back on because it's in our way. We're the person that does the maintenance on that piece of equipment, and if we keep putting that guard back on, it's going to cost us more time to get to the place that we need to oil the gears or the chains or the sprockets or whatever it may be, or it's just a pain to keep taking it off and putting it back on. So what do? We leave it off, and so when we do that, when we make that decision, we're telling people our priority is not safety and health. Our priority is getting things done quick. And that can cause us problems. It's not a good safety culture decision, and it doesn't show that you value yourself, your family, or the coworkers or their families. Do we always use trench boxes or slope? How many times? Hopefully none, but I'm not going to be a little crazy, because I know people go ahead and jump in trenches without a trench box, and they think, or they tell themselves, oh, I'll only be there 5 minutes, or it only take 10 minutes. I can be down there, get the job done, be out, and no one's the wiser, no one will get hurt, and you're taking an unnecessary risk. It's just an unnecessary risk. So, use your trench box, use it correctly, slope like you need to slope, do the things you need to do to stay safe. Is there something we only do when someone's watching? That right there is a big problem. I mean, it's an absolutely big problem, because it's not a positive attitude. It's not. It shows that positive reinforcement is not present at your facility. So if you're only doing something right when somebody's watching you, safety and health is not a priority. You don't value yourself, you don't value your coworkers, and you sure don't value y'all's families. Because, when something bad goes wrong, it's going to be a bad deal, and everybody's going to feel sad, and everybody's going to be hurt, but no one took responsibility enough and set the priority of having safety as a priority. They wanted to get done quick, and they did it at the expense of someone's safety. Do we stand in harm's way when track hose are being used? Chains, ropes, slings are under stress. This is pretty straightforward type stuff. When you approach a track hoe, a backhoe, or any kind of heavy equipment, you want to make sure you have the operator's attention before you get within the swinging radius of either the counterweight or the bucket, right? Backhoe operators, track hoe operators take pride in what they do. They want to do a good job, and so they work hard at it, and that takes concentration. And if you're not paying attention and you get within the swinging radius of the counterweight or the bucket, you're taking a chance on getting hurt. So make sure you have that operator's attention before you get within the swinging radius. Make sure you understand what's going on. As far as chains, ropes, and slings, these are all products that are under stress. And when they're under stress, if something's wrong with them, if they've not been inspected correctly or may never have been inspected, do you know what the capacity, how much stress can you put them under? Those things snap, and when they snap, they fly through the air. People have been decapitated. People have lost arms and legs, hands and feet when these things snap. So If you don't have to be standing around that stuff, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of harm's way. Don't stand there. Do we allow others to stand in the harm's way without saying anything? Now, we're talking about chains, ropes, and slings here, but this could be for anything, right? So if you see somebody and they're about to do something that they're going to regret, stop them. Have a discussion with them. Say, hey, we don't do that here. We stand over here. We don't expose ourselves to things that can hurt us. And when you make the decision that somebody's feelings are not as important as their safety, you're making a good safety decision. So keep that in mind. Do we follow lockout, tagout procedures? This is a big deal also. It goes hand in hand with putting guards back on equipment after we're finished with it, really. So following lockout, tagout procedures is a big deal. We want to isolate energy, whether it's electrical, whether it's pneumatic, whether it's hydraulic, whether it's something like a spring that's on the inside of a piece of equipment, or something's under pressure. We want to isolate that energy. After we isolate it, if there's anything stored in there, we want to bleed it off. We want to make sure there's nothing in there that can hurt us. And then, of course, the last step is to push the start button and make sure the machine doesn't start. Make sure we got our lock on there. Make sure we have the only key to the lock. Push the start button. Make sure it doesn't start. And then we're safe to go do what we need to do. Now, if on the other hand, you've done everything that's in the procedure, you push the start button, and that machine starts, you've either performed the procedure wrong or there's been a change made in the machine, and you need to go back and figure out what you need to do to make it safe for you to work on it. This is a big deal for all pieces of equipment, big and little, so keep that in mind. Do we always wear our hard hats, safety glasses, wear the right gloves, high visibility vest, and other PPE like we're supposed to? There again, this is a big deal. I'll be the first one to tell you that personal protective equipment is the last line of defense, and that we ought to have things in place ahead of the PPE. But the PPE is a good thing. Hard hats have saved people good hard licks to the noggin. Safety glasses have protected people's eyes. Who knows how many eyes have been saved by people wearing safety glasses with their side shields. Having on gloves have been able to keep people from severe cuts and lacerations, abrasions to their hands, protected their hands from chemicals. High visibility vests protect people from motorists. You know, being able to see somebody goes a long way to avoid hitting them. So that's a big deal. Now, like I've said before, PPE has its limitations. It does. It just has its limitations. So safety glasses, hard hats, gloves, they're all great. We should wear them. And even though they're not comfortable all the time, we need to wear them. But the most or the best piece of safety equipment you have is what's between your ears. And so don't, just because you have on a piece of safety equipment does not put a Superman decal on your chest and allow you to do anything you want to do. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Wear your PPE. It's good stuff, but also think about where you're at and what you're doing, because it does have limitations. Keep that in mind. Do we say anything to others when they don't wear their PPE? There again, this is a big deal. You don't want to prioritize someone's feelings over a good safety and health culture. Now, you can go approach somebody without hurting their feelings and explain to them we wear hard hats, we wear safety glasses, we wear safety shoes, and when we do this job here, we wear gloves, etc. So, you know, make sure you go up and talk to people. Make sure they understand that the safety is a priority on your crew and the people around you. And you'll be amazed. They may talk bad about you for a little bit, but after you do that, people are going to start wearing their safety equipment, start doing things the right way. So that's a good thing. Machines aren't perfect. New equipment, changes in old equipment creates new hazards, and people sure aren't perfect, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So we want to keep those things in the forefronts of our mind, and make sure you do maintenance on your machines. Make sure you check your machines and make sure they operate correctly. Backhoe and trackhoe operators, every time you get in, you ought to check the controls and make sure the controls work like they're supposed to. All the safety features of the equipment works like it is supposed to work. You ought to do checks before you use any piece of equipment. That's from a tool that you pull out of a toolbox to a chainsaw to a backhoe or a track hoe. You need to do a little check and make sure that stuff's in good working order. Of course, a lot of times we get new equipment or they modify the old equipment and we get some new features, or somebody goes in and they replace bushings or bearings or whatever it may be. And so you still want to check the equipment, make sure it feels right. Make sure it feels right. So keep that in mind. People aren't perfect. That's why we have job briefings. We have job briefings. It's not just checking a box on a form or saying, yeah, this is what we're going to do. You really want to take your job briefing seriously. Make sure that when you're out there doing your job briefings that you do look around for hazards. Make sure you bring up stuff and talk about it. That's your opportunity to address things that you see. So don't discount that. There again, if safety is a priority, you're going to do these things the right way. Accidents aren't planned, right? They're just not planned. And so if you do plan an accident, we pretty much call that murder here in the state of Tennessee. So make sure that you understand that these unplanned events can happen, and that's why we need to stay vigilant, and that's why safety needs to be a priority, and it needs to be something that informs our decisions, right? Informs our decisions. We can reduce the risk of someone getting hurt. Okay? So when we're talking about safety and talking about priorities and talking about the decisions we make, it's all about reducing the risk to yourself and the people you work with. Keeping everybody safe, letting them go home the same way they came to work, and being able to enjoy life outside of work. Okay? So keep that in mind. Everything we do either increases or decreases the risk that something bad can happen. I'm going to repeat that. Everything we do either increases or decreases the risk that something bad can happen. So it's just that simple. Very rarely is there anything neutral in what we do in safety and health. You either follow the procedures or you don't. You either wear your PPE or you don't. You either prioritize your safety and the safety of the people you work with, or you don't. I wish that there was some way I could tell you we could stay neutral, but life doesn't work that way in safety and health. So you want to reduce the risk that something bad can happen to you and the people you work with. And that's a good safety culture. That's a good safety culture. So inspect, maintain, and make sure that your equipment's running right and safe. I've already mentioned this, but if you get on a fork truck, you get on a backhoe or track hoe, you're getting ready to operate a chainsaw, whatever it may be, look at the piece of equipment. Make sure that it's been maintained. Make sure that when you first start that stuff up, that the forks operate like they're supposed to, the brakes operate like they're supposed to. There's no hydraulic leaks, there's no brake leaks. The engine's got enough oil in it, and the list goes on and on. But the reason we do that is to make sure things don't go bad and somebody doesn't get hurt. Make sure all the guards are in place and adjusted properly. If you can fit your hand or any part of your body around, under, or through a guard, it's not adjusted correctly, right? Around, under, through, or over. If you can get any part of your body behind a guard, then you've got a problem there. So put the guards back on. Keep the people who use the equipment safe after you've maintained it. And before you use it, make sure it works. Make sure it works. Make sure the chains on the chainsaws are sharp. Make sure your knife blades are sharp. All that good stuff's important. Make sure that you use a trench box correctly. So a lot of times people will use a trench box, but they don't use it right. So mainly what I'm thinking about when I say something like that is when you put a trench box down in a hole, you're supposed to backfill on the sides. That way, if there's a partial cave-in, the trench box won't move. Now, I know they're made out of aluminum, but they're still pretty heavy, and if you have a partial collapse, it'll move that trench box around, and if it lifts up and then drops on somebody's foot or leg, you're going to have a serious injury there. Potentially a crushing injury that cause them to lose their foot or really break it. So keep that in mind. Use your trench box correctly. Just don't use it as a piece of decoration to put over there on the side of the road so when somebody drops by you can say, hey, we're using a trench box. No, that's not what we're talking about. Actually put it in the hole and backfill it so it's stable. Make sure the slope's right. Most of the time it's going to be easier to slope than it is to use a trench box. So Class C soil is typically what most people just assume the soil is. So go ahead when you do that and slope it back at 34 degrees. That's what you're supposed to do for Class C soil. Make sure you do it right. Inspect your slings, chains, and ropes to make sure that they're adequate. We've already talked about that a little bit. But slings, chains, and ropes that you're using to lift stuff with a crane or whatever, they need to be labeled. They need to be rated. You need to inspect them. So make sure whatever kind of sling it is that it meets the established criteria by the manufacturer and that it can hold what it's labeled for. Make sure when you inspect your chains that the chains don't have any elongated links or twisted links or deformed in any way. When you watch or inspect your ropes, make sure they're not bird caged. Make sure the strands aren't torn up. Make sure all that stuff works well. Make sure it's in good shape. That goes for all kinds of ropes, whether they're metal or not. Stand away from heavy equipment. There again, saying it again. If you don't need to be there, don't be there. If you're going to approach heavy equipment, make sure that you have the operator's attention before you get there, and make sure they understand that you're approaching them. Because if you get inside the radius of the bucket or the counterweight, you can definitely get yourself hurt, maybe even killed if you get struck by that stuff. So keep that in mind. Wear your PPE correctly. So if you've got a hard hat on, make sure the shell's good. Make sure the harness on the inside's good. Make sure it's ANSI, got an ANSI stamp on it. Make sure your safety glasses and side shields have the ANSI stamp on them. Make sure that if you're wearing earplugs, hearing protection, which is important for a quality of life type deal, make sure that you put the expanded foam earplugs in your ear correctly, and make sure that your boots and all that good stuff's in good working order. Be aware of what's around and communicate problems and potential problems to people. There again, this is something that you can do during the job briefing. Make sure you look around. Just don't go through the motions. Actually look around and look for potential problems, and talk to people about it. Make sure people are ready for what can happen, and make sure people are prepared and do the best that they can to keep themselves safe and the people around them safe, okay? Now, when we talk about controls, the way we try to control accidents is we try to fit them in some categories. And the first category is an engineering control, and that's really the best control we have. Hopefully the engineers have designed a piece of equipment, and that piece of equipment does a good job of keeping you safe, and it eliminates the need for you to have to wear PPE and eliminates the need for you to have to stand in a certain place. But you know what? That's not always the case. So engineering controls, using less hazardous chemicals falls under that as well. If you can use something that's not as hazardous, then by all means use it. Administrative controls, that has to do with job rotation. That has to do with where you stand when work's being done. Don't let a man kill himself, right? Rotate people. Take care of everybody. So that's about job rotation and keeping people as fresh as you can so that they can pay attention to what they're doing. And it's about not standing next to heavy equipment and putting yourself in harm's way. Personal protective equipment we've talked about. That is the last line of defense as far as safety goes. The PPE we have nowadays is so good, so much better than what it used to be. It's still a pain to have to deal with, but it's important to use it. It's important to know the limitations of it and to be smart about how you're using your PPE. PPE is good stuff, hard hats, safety glasses, safety boots, all this stuff is good. But the best piece of safety equipment you have is what's between your ears. So realize even though your PPE is really good stuff, it does have limitations. And if you're not careful, you put yourself in harm's way and your PPE might not help you. So keep that in mind. It takes more. All these things, engineering controls, having engineers design equipment well, keeping the guards on them, using less hazardous chemicals, not standing next to a piece of equipment that can hurt you, rotating so that one man doesn't kill himself, wearing your PPE and wearing it properly. These are all important things, but it takes more than that. It takes an attitude. It takes making safety a priority and making it a priority so that the decisions you make reflect the priority of safety. So it takes people with safety and health as a priority to reduce the risk. It takes people making right decisions based on that priority to reduce the risk. This is just important. It's just important. It takes people making safety and health a priority, and that really is what safety culture is. It takes people making decisions, making right decisions because they have safety and health as a priority. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So I want to say thank you for paying attention. I appreciate everybody paying attention. If you have any questions, please have a discussion. Please talk to your safety manager, your safety director, the person in charge of safety. Talk to your supervisor, crew leaders. These are all important things to do. And if you need any help, you can always contact us at JTNS, and we'll be more than happy to make sure that we approach your questions with seriousness and get you the best answer we can get you. Have a great day. Thank you.